The date is September 2nd, 1963. Parishioners sit uneasily inside of the sanctuary of Little Union Baptist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana. A week prior, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, was firebombed by members of the KKK, resulting in the senseless murder of 4 young black girls. The African American community in Shreveport has come together tonight to mourn the loss of the little girls in solidarity with NAACP chapters all over the country. But they are not alone. Gathered outside of the church are around 200 police officers armed with batons, tear gas, riot gear, and guns of all kinds, most of them lethal. At the head of these officers was Shreveport's Commissioner of Public Safety, George Dartoy, and he is not happy. Earlier that day, he had denied the protesters a permit to march down the street to Little Union prior to the service. Upon finding out that they were still going to hold the service, it became his mission to stop it. Terrified by the small army besieging their place of worship, attendees informed Dartoy that they wanted to leave, at which point he allowed them to exit the church in pairs. This was not to be the end of it. After most of the people had left the church, only the local NAACP president, Harry Blake, and a few others remained. Blake later recalled, quote, "About that time, I heard a commotion outside the church, and when I went to check on it, 3 policemen and Dartoy met me, and 2 of the policemen pulled me outside and began beating me. Every officer who could get a piece of me with his billy club stepped in. When they felt they had enough, or thought I was dead, they left me lifeless in the driveway." End quote. There was no question about who ordered his beating, and some witnesses state that Dartoy actively participated, although this is unconfirmed, since Blake had covered up into a protective ball and could not see who was delivering the blows. The following day, students from Booker T. Washington High School staged a walkout to protest the beating of Reverend Blake. Dartoy's response this time was even more violent. Dozens of marchers were brutalized by the police that day, and dozens more arrested. It seemed the only way to stop Dartoy was to remove him from power. The Commissioner of Public Safety was one of 5 positions on the City Commission elected at large, and was in charge of the police force. What the commission form of government meant is that each position on the City Council was chosen to represent the entire city rather than a subset or district of it. Knowing this, the solution to Dartoy's tyranny seemed simple: vote him out. But it wasn't that simple. Shreveport has an intense history of voter discrimination. During the period from June of 1960 to July of 1965, voter registration of whites increased by 2,000. During that same period, black registration increased by only 103. The reasons for this were the overly strict requirements placed on aspiring black voters. Where white persons were allowed to register with minor errors such as misspellings or wrong addresses, minority applicants were rejected. During one 2-month span, 337 blacks were rejected on purported grounds of inadequate satisfaction of the criteria, while only 15 white applicants were denied registration for similar reasons. Following the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the United States Attorney General assigned registrars to Shreveport to, quote, "bring about compliance with the Constitution and laws of the United States regarding the rights of black citizens of lawful age to register and vote," end quote. Voting was also polarized along racial lines. So despite making up 32% of the population in 1974, there had yet to be a single African American elected as a commissioner in the city's history. So again, the question arises, what can be done about Dartoy? Enter Hilry Huckaby III. Born in Shreveport in 1944, Huck, as he was affectionately called, graduated from Southern University Law School in Baton Rouge in 1969. After several years in public service, Huck returned home to join in the fight for civil rights. He's been described as a man of, quote, courage and magnitude, end quote. Reverend Azrael McLean, the current pastor of Little Union Baptist Church, was a classmate of his at Southern, and says of Huck, quote, "Hilary was very bright, cordial, with good people skills. He wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, showy. His dress matched and made up his personality." End quote. Along with the local dentist Lewis Pendleton, Hilary founded the organization Blacks United for Lasting Leadership, or B.U.L.L. It was through this organization that Huckaby was able to file the most important case he would ever argue, B.U.L.L versus the city of Shreveport. See, Huck recognized that the only way to ensure fair black representation in the city government was to abandon the at-large commission form of government entirely and instead apportion Shreveport into 5 single-member districts. Instead of the entire city voting for a specific commissioner job, each district would select someone to represent them on the city council. He also knew that the only way to do this was by judicial order. So, in April of 1974, Huck sued the city of Shreveport for violating the 14th and 15th Amendments. The 14th Amendment guaranteed the equal protection under the law for all races, while the 15th ensured all African Americans had the right to equal participation in voting. The city, represented by John Gallagher, immediately filed motions attempting to get the case dismissed. Their primary argument was that since B.U.L.L was an organization and not a registered voter, it was not the appropriate plaintiff. However, Huckaby himself was also listed as a plaintiff and was a registered voter. The presiding judge, Benjamin Dawkins Jr., was thus not swayed, and the trial was set to begin on May 2, 1974. The city argued that the at-large system affirmed the one-man, one-vote philosophy of democracy, and that the commission form of government incentivized voters to choose the candidate most qualified for the specific roles each job entailed. While Judge Dawkins acknowledged that these arguments had merit, they ignored the fundamental question of the case, whether or not this system disenfranchised minority voters. To this question, the city argued that since there was historical evidence that black voters may have been the swing votes in several elections, that meaningful participation was occurring. In their view, helping to sway an election by 1 or 2 percentage points every dozen or so elections counted as meaningful participation. In response to this, Huckaby's most effective argument was a simple mathematical exercise. In a truly representative democracy, a race which makes up 32% of the population should ideally make up 32% of the representation in government. Therefore, in a council of 5 members, 32%, or around 1.5 of them, should be African American. Yet their voting power was so diluted, only one black man had ever even attempted to run for a position on the city council in the history of the city. Although he ran well in predominantly black precincts, he received only 12% of the votes cast citywide. This argument was not enough to win the case by itself. Huckaby also had to show that the reason for this discrepancy was not simply voter apathy, but systemic, coordinated voter suppression. To do this, Huckaby had to present mountains of census data, employment data, voter registration data, and legal precedent from similar cases in Louisiana, namely Zimmer v. McKeithen and East Carroll Parish School Board v. Marshall. Huckaby also showed definitively that the concentration of the black population into several identifiable geographic areas was due directly to the city's history of housing segregation. With both sides having made their arguments, on April 22, 1975, more than a year after the lawsuit was initiated, the trial was over. Unlike in court dramas, the judgment is not given immediately. Rather, months pass. The final result? The court ruled that the current charter of the city government was in fact unconstitutional. In his opinion, Judge Hawkins wrote, quote, "The commission council form of municipal government in Shreveport, requiring at-large election of all commissioners, operates impermissibly to dilute the minority voting strength of black electors." End quote. The city was given 1 year to write a new charter of government. The good guys had won. In August of 1976, amid numerous allegations of corruption, and with his power all but eliminated by the new charter, George Dartoy stepped down as Commissioner of Public Safety. Any hope of a return to local politics went out of the window on April 19, 1977, when Dartoy was arrested on charges of ordering the murder of a former campaign worker, Jim Leslie, to keep him from testifying against Dartoy in corruption hearings. Shreveport journalist Bill Keith, in his book The Commissioner, A True Story of Deceit, Dishonor, and Death, wrote, quote, "When the commissioner went to jail, his empire of deceit, dishonor, and death virtually disappeared overnight." End quote. Sadly, before Dartoy could be forced to face justice for his many crimes, he died on June 11, 1977. As for Huck, he used his monumental victory to be elected to the new city council in 1978, serving until 1990. In 1992, Huck was elected as a Caddo Parish District Court judge and served until 1998, when he returned again to the city council. Hilry Huckaby III passed away on June 1, 2001, at the age of 56. The first lines of his obituary in the Shreveport Times reads appropriately, "Warrior, Prince of the Grassroots, Street Fighter, Dad." Today, Shreveport is divided into 7 districts represented by 7 councilors. Since 1978, 3 of Shreveport's 9 mayors have been African American, and their representation on the city council has been largely proportional to their population size. Despite these advances, there is still more work to be done. In an interview I had with former District B Councilwoman Lavette Fuller, she highlighted 2 main issues present under the current charter: gerrymandering and wealth inequality. To combat local gerrymandering practices, one suggestion is having outside independent organizations assist in the occasional redistricting of the city to ensure as equitable a demographic makeup as possible. The latter issue of wealth inequality can also be addressed during the redistricting process, so long as officials take care to not group too many families with high incomes in the same areas where poverty is high. This way, the rich cannot use their wealth to disproportionately advantage their candidate over the candidate of the common man, should they be competing in the same district. I have no doubt that the continued efforts of men like Hilry Huckaby III and the protesters he worked with will prove to overcome the vile efforts of those like George Dartoy, who would seek to stymie progress in the name of racism. In the words of Reverend McLean, as we ended our interview, amen, amen, amen. I'm Thomas James. Thank you for watching.